My name is Maya. And this is my story. I want to take you back to the day I got the letter. I was 17 years old. I had spent 4 years doing everything right. Straight A's. Every AP class my school offered. I took the SAT 3 times to get my score where I needed it. I wrote my personal essay 11 times. 11 drafts. Because I knew I only had one shot, and I was not going to waste it. And then one afternoon I came home, and there was an envelope on the kitchen counter. From Crestwood University. I want you to understand what Crestwood meant to me. Top 20 school in the country. The kind of place that changes the entire trajectory of your life. The kind of place where you walk in as one person and walk out as someone the world has to take seriously. I tore that envelope open standing right there in the kitchen. And I got in. Full need-based scholarship. Everything covered. I screamed. I literally screamed in that kitchen by myself because there was nobody home yet, and I could not hold it in. And then my mom walked in, and I ran to her. I shoved that letter in her hands. I said, Mom, I got into Crestwood. I got the scholarship. Full ride. She looked at the letter. She handed it back to me, and she said, and I will never forget this as long as I live. She said, oh, that's nice, baby. And she went back to the kitchen. That's nice. Like I told her it might rain tomorrow. Like I said I found a quarter in my coat pocket. That's nice. Told myself she was tired. I told myself she had a long day at work. I made excuses for her the way I had always made excuses for her. That was my first mistake. That night at dinner I told my whole family. My dad. He jumped out of his chair. He hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. My dad was proud of me. I could feel it. But my sister Jade just sat there cutting her chicken. And she said, isn't that like 2 hours away? Not congratulations. Not oh my God, Maya, you did it. She said, isn't that like 2 hours away? And then she looked at my mother and said, Mom was telling me about a nursing program at the community college. It's closer. And just like that, the air in the room changed. My mother put down her fork and said, nobody said anything about Crestwood. And my father, my sweet, quiet, conflict-avoidant father, looked down at his plate and said nothing. That was my second mistake, thinking his silence was neutral. A week later I came home and found my mother and my sister sitting at the coffee table together. Papers everywhere. They looked up when I walked in and there was this flicker, just a second, on my mother's face. Something that looked almost like guilt. And Jade said, I'm transferring. I said, transferring where? She said Crestwood. I went completely still. Because Jade. Let me give you some context about Jade. Jade was at community college. Her GPA was not strong. Crestwood had a 3.7 minimum for transfer students. Jade did not have a 3.7. So I said, you can't transfer to Crestwood, Jade. And she smiled at me. That smile she had, that sweet unbothered smile. And she said, I got a letter of recommendation from Dean Hargrove. He's an old friend of the family. And she looked at my mother when she said it. And my mother looked away. I want you to hold on to that moment. My mother looking away. Because that moment was the whole truth. I just didn't have the words for it yet. A few weeks later I went to the Crestwood admissions office to finalize my enrollment. The woman behind the desk was typing and she stopped. And she frowned at her screen. And she said, that's odd. I said, what's wrong? She said there was a processing issue with my financial aid. The scholarship, the Meridian Academic Scholarship, the one tied to my application, the one I earned, it had been redirected. I asked her who it was redirected to. She said she couldn't share that information. She told me to speak with Dean Hargrove's office. And I said very quietly, I said, was it redirected to a transfer student named Jade Henderson? And she didn't answer. But her face did. I sat outside on a campus bench for I don't know how long. Just sat there. Because I want you to understand what that meant. My scholarship wasn't just money. It was the entire reason I could attend that school without destroying my family financially. Without it, I had to take out loans. I had to get 2 jobs. 2 part-time jobs while carrying a full course load. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches for weeks at a time. While my sister, My sister, who did not earn admission to that school, was walking around that campus on my scholarship, on my future, that I spent 4 years building, that my mother handed to her. I confronted my mother. I went home that weekend and I looked her in the eye and I asked her to tell me the truth. And she turned around from the kitchen sink and she actually said this to me. She said, "Jade needed that opportunity more than you." I couldn't speak. She said, "You're resilient, Maya. You always land on your feet. Jade struggles. She's not like you. She needed a boost." A boost. She called stealing my college scholarship a boost. And then my dad walked in the room. And I turned to him. And I asked, "Did you know, Dad? Did you know what she did?" And he looked at his shoes. I will never forget that image for the rest of my life. My father, looking at his shoes. I went to see my Aunt Patricia the next day. She is the only person in my family who has always seen me clearly. The only one who never treated me like I was fine, so she didn't have to think about me. I told her everything. And she said to me, "I've been waiting for you to walk through that door and tell me something like this." She explained something I had never been able to put into words. She said, "You are your mother's given, the one she doesn't have to invest in, because you invest in yourself." She knew you'd be okay, so she moved every resource toward Jade. And then she leaned forward and she said, "So here's what you do. You document everything. You find out exactly how the dean was involved, and then you wait." I spent the next 18 months building my case. Not dramatically, not like a movie, like a quiet, determined, absolutely furious young woman who had been wronged and was not going to let it go. I sent FOIA requests to the university scholarship office. I collected every email I could access. I got a part-time job at the campus print center, which gave me access to departmental records. And I made friends with the dean's assistant. Her name was Brenda. She had worked for him for 9 years, and most people treated her like she wasn't there. I treated her like a person. Because she was. And one afternoon she mentioned, just in passing, that she had found a handwritten note in Hargrove's files. An authorization note. It said, "Reallocate Award 2024, M. 117 per family request." Family request. My mother had called in a favor. Hargrove had moved my scholarship to Jade's application. And there was a paper trail. Brenda found the email too. An email between Dean Hargrove and my mother, Carol Henderson. Dated 14 months before the scholarship was even awarded. My mother had planned this before I applied. She looked at my dream, before I even chased it, and decided it belonged to Jade. I took everything to the chancellor's office 2 days before graduation. Jade's graduation. I sat down across from Chancellor Briggs, and I put the folder on his desk. The note, the email, the reallocation records, all of it. And I told him, "I'm not asking you to cancel the ceremony. I'm not asking you to do anything dramatic. I'm just asking you to be in that room with this information, and be ready to do what's right. Graduation day. I want you to picture this. The gymnasium is beautiful. Full. Sunlight coming through the tall windows. Everyone in gold and white. My mother in the bleachers in her good dress, smiling so big. She was so proud. She just had no idea what was coming. I sat in the crowd. Not in a cap and gown. Just a girl with a folder in her bag and 4 years of patience that was about to finally run out. They called names. People walked. And then Chancellor Briggs stepped to the podium and said he needed to address something before the final conferrals. The room went quiet. He explained there had been an irregularity in the Meridian Scholarship Award from 2024, that a scholarship designated for an incoming first-year student had been improperly transferred to a separate transfer application, that Dean Hargrove had been placed on administrative leave, and I watched Jade, sitting in the graduate section, go completely still. She stood up. She said this was insane. She said it was a mistake. And then she found me in the crowd. And she stopped talking. We looked at each other across that gymnasium. And she said, barely above a whisper, "You did this." I did. Not out of hatred. Not for revenge exactly. For the truth. Because the truth doesn't need a reason. It just needs someone willing to say it out loud. She caught up to me in the parking lot after. She said I humiliated her. I said she erased mine before it could even happen. She said she needed that scholarship. I said I needed it too. And nobody asked me. And then, I didn't expect this, she broke. She said she knew. She said she had known the whole time. She said she told our mother it wasn't right, and our mother said I would be fine because I was always fine. And I said to her, that is not an excuse, Jade. And she said, I know. And I said, I used to look up to you. When we were little, I thought you hung the moon. And she said, I'm sorry. And I looked at her for a long time. And I said, I know you are. But sorry doesn't give me back 2 years. And I walked away. My Aunt Patricia was waiting by her car. She held me for a long time without saying anything. And then she said, how do you feel? I said, strange. Empty. A little light. She said, that's what truth feels like when you finally put it down. 1 month later, the university board called me. The Meridian Scholarship was officially restored to my name. They issued a financial reconciliation for the 2 years I hadn't received it. Dean Hargrove resigned. And they offered me a place in the honors thesis program for my final year. My mother and I, that's a longer story. Maybe a story that never fully ends. There are things she said to me that still live in my chest like splinters. But I'm working on it. Not for her. For me. Because carrying hatred is heavy. And I have already spent too much time carrying things that weren't mine. My father apologized. He stood on the front porch and said he was sorry for not saying anything. For letting it happen. And I asked him, are you going to be sorry once, or are you going to be different? And he said he was going to be different. And I stepped inside. And we talked. Really talked. For the first time. My graduation day. My real one. I stood in line in my cap and gown. And I thought about 17-year-old Maya screaming alone in a kitchen holding an envelope. I thought about the ramen. The 2 jobs. The nights I cried in my campus apartment wondering if any of this was worth it. And then I heard my name. Maya Renee Henderson. Biology. Meridian Scholar. Honors thesis recipient. I walked across that stage. My dad was in the front row. Eyes completely red. He put down his phone for all 3 hours. That's how I knew it was real. My Aunt Patricia was there in her best hat. My best friend Aaliyah was screaming so loud people turned around. And in the back of the bleachers, quietly, not clapping, just watching, was Jade. She didn't cheer. But she was there. And maybe that was its own kind of sorry. People ask me sometimes, was it worth it? The 2 years of struggle. The investigation. The scene at the graduation. The family fallout. And here's what I know. The truth doesn't ask you whether it's convenient. It doesn't care if it's messy. It doesn't care if it costs you something. It just waits. Patiently. For someone with enough love for themselves to finally say it. My name is Maya Henderson. I earned every single thing I have. And nobody, not my sister, not my mother, not anyone, will ever take that from me again.